Well, I mean, God almighty, what codswallop, if I'm allowed to say that. I mean, the whole idea was so ill-conceived beyond all belief. I mean, everybody not only knew what the Royal Mail was, but what it stood for, but actually, as a brand, it had enormous power and affection and all the things you'd want a brand to have. And someone decided to come up with a name that made absolutely no sense whatsoever. It was one of the first things that we did, but rather oddly, we actually had to phone Buckingham Palace to change it back because they had to get permission from there to move it in the first place. They had to get permission to change it back. It was just crazy. Crazy.
So you need to have that vision. You need to be able to express it in words that ordinary people can understand. You've also got to earn people's respect very quickly as well, and credibility. So not over-promising what you're going to do, but also I think in the turnaround environment, you need to be a really visible leader. And I think you get that respect by not shirking big decisions, doing the unpopular things, standing up in front of the workforce and saying, I'm sorry, this factory's closing. You gain respect in an odd way by not bottling those things and actually confronting them. If people understand what the rationale underlying is, what was the most unpopular thing you had to do? With Compare, we were closing factories quite quickly and standing there in areas with high unemployment saying, I'm sorry, this just doesn't work, we're going to have to close it. And, the employees go through the whole range of emotion and you get completely different reactions depending on the circumstances.
Well, let's come to that. Just before we do, let me remind everyone they're listening to The Bottom Line with Adam Crozier of ITV and formerly Royal Mail, James Eden of Private White VC, and Nick Sanders of Better Capital. Just a reminder too, we do enjoy reading your emails, comments, quips, complaints, even if you could think of one, to thebottomline@bbc.co.uk. All right, well, let's talk a little bit about labour relations, because this must be the hardest aspect of the whole thing. You're probably making, in any of these situations, some really tortured, difficult choices about stuff. Talk us through, Adam, how it worked at Royal Mail, because it was famously disruptive and a turbulent time for industrial relations. One of the key things, I think, was there was a sense within the organisation of what I would call sort of learned helplessness, which is over many, many years, people had sort of almost begun to believe there was nothing they could do about this. It was inevitable. It was really just about managing decline. That was the job. I think the management believed that, and I think to some extent the workforce believed that as well. And that created a very sort of negative culture. It was massively overmanaged. I think we had something like 18,000 central managers. We really sort of cleaned out that middle management layer. I remember in the space of 2 months, we lost about 6,000 managers, and you really didn't notice the difference. In fact, it was just better, almost from the moment you did it, because less costed, everyone was just getting in the way of everyone else, and then really invested in the frontline managers, because you took the view that if you worked in a delivery office in Torquay, the person who ran the Royal Mail was the delivery office manager in Torquay. That's how you had to think about it, that was the most important person in the organisation. So making sure they were the right calibre of people, paying them properly, really training and developing them, helping them sort of create better relationships, that all of that was hugely important, because that was where you really make the difference. And then lastly, we had to break the cycle that was company tries to do the right thing, argument with the union, strike starts, government tell management back down, management back down, off we go again for another few years. And so the first national strike we had went on for quite some time. And the important thing we had to show was not just by words, but by actions, was that this was going to be different. And actually, it went to a vote, and we won the vote, which I think at the time really shocked the union. And it's partly because actually the workforce understood the scale of the problem actually better than the union did at that stage. So, again, that had to be said about you now, though. I think we always try to respect that they were absolutely doing what they thought was the right thing, which was sticking up for their members and the union membership. And, of course, they didn't end up where they did by
choice. You know, the company had been underinvested in for 20, 30 years. A lot of their members have been treated really badly, were badly paid. So they hadn't become strong for no reason. They'd become strong because actually the company treated its employees really badly over a long period of time. So I think you always had to remind yourself that they were absolutely doing what they felt was the right thing, and they were trying to make things better for their people and their members. And I think it's important to respect that. You may be disagreeing about something, but it doesn't mean you can't stand back from that and see the other person's point of view. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I mean, in my experience as well, the unions have normally stepped up and filled a void where management should be.
Absolutely.
You know, management should have been communicating, should have been telling people about the situation honestly. And in these kind of distress situations, you find that hasn't happened. And so the union guys have actually fulfilled the need for the workforce to be communicated to. And so part of what you have to do as management is to get that balance right again. Unions are realists. They know that things are difficult for a lot of companies. You know that unless you take some tough action, the whole entity's not going to survive. And so actually, I think if you approach it in the right way, yeah, you're going to have run-ins. Yes, you're going to have tussles and trying to prove who's in charge. But actually, I think good management gets good relations with the union.
2 or 3 years in, we used to laugh about it because I made what I discovered to be a horrific mistake in the first 2 weeks, or at least people thought it was, which is one of the first things I did was I wrote to everybody in the company, and the reaction was, how dare you write to our people? No, they're my people. They want to the company. And it was exactly as Nick just said, which is the company had sort of abdicated all responsibility for its people, which is, you can't blame the union for that. You have to blame the management.
It's extraordinary. It is very peculiar, actually.
Yeah.
So, James, tell us how, because you're a much smaller, much more personal organisation than the ones we're hearing about here.
But we have no unions, but we work with a lot of families. So in my business, I employ, husband and wife and 3 kids. And at times when, in the past, we've had to make cuts, it's become very, very difficult from a personal point of view. And, I've had to, make Auntie Edie, who when I was 13 years old, bring me candy floss when I was in the factory. I had to make her redundant. So from a personal point of view, it's been very, very difficult. But if you treat people fairly, and you show them that you're doing things for the good of everyone, the business most importantly, but also the remainder of the staff, then you win their respect.
But have any of you found sort of violence, unpleasantness? I mean, it must be
You'd be amazed what goes on in a factory in Manchester. It's a lot of pressure, a lot of heat, a lot of tension. It's an emotional place, it's a charged environment, you get a lot of tears, a lot of tantrums, a lot of things thrown, it's a great place to work, but it's very real, very raw.
You get called a lot of not very nice names very quickly, and you stand and take it. I've had my car vandalised outside factories and things like that because you're doing the unpopular thing, but it actually only takes 1 or 2 people within a group to react in a certain way, and it sets everything else off. You really can't predict it. And you have to handle it, and you have to stand there. If you're the boss, you're giving bad news. You stand there and you take it.
Certainly in the things that I've done, whether it was at the FA, which was very public, and when you appoint the first non-English football manager, you tend to get a bit of a reaction. And I guess between there and Royal Mail, probably had a pretty large number of death threats and various other things, which is not to look for sympathy, because actually, as you know, lots of people in the public eye do get some strange things written to them. But it is this thing that you get reminded of, which is, it really isn't a popularity contest. It is about doing the right thing and trying to get something to the right place. But it can be unpleasant.
We haven't spoken much about ITV actually, and it wasn't an organisation that was about to go bust, but it was certainly an organisation with some difficulty when you took over. It does seem to be going better. Is that down to you, or is that down to cyclical factors? What is that?
We go back 3 years, actually, it was in quite severe trouble. It had been through a really tough 2008-9. Advertising had completely collapsed. And here we are 3 years later, and we've gone from having debts of around £800 million to positive cash of around 600 to 200. So an £800 million turnaround. It was, again, the classic case. Had underinvested in content, didn't have a digital strategy, didn't have a pay strategy, was too reliant on one source of income, advertising, didn't really exist outside of the UK to any real extent. And all of that needed sort of turning around. And we've changed a lot of leadership team. We've probably changed about a third of the entire organisation in 3 years, and our earnings per share have more than quadrupled.
Not done with that?
No, very much not. I mean, I think that's the thing about these things. You learn after a while that it's a big regress I have. Is I did it at Royal Mail, and actually I may have slightly repeated it at ITV actually just to prove you never learn. Is that at Royal Mail we called it a 3-year turnaround, and at ITV we said it's a 5-year turnaround plan. And the reality, of course, is once you start changing, you never stop.
It's interesting though, as a turnaround leader, you've got to know when it's time to go. Is the job done? And, I think leadership styles do have a suitability for a certain part of a business's existence. You can stay too long. There comes a point when, as a leader, you've done the big things you wanted to do, and you have to acknowledge it. There's probably somebody better to take it on to the next place.
It must be quite lonely going into a place. I mean, you have to hunt out all the negatives, snoop around, deal with the negatives rather than the positives. You have to break an awful lot of bad news to people. You're going to make a lot of mistakes. Lonely occupation.
It is, and it can be, but it can also be fantastic.
You're right, it's lonely and it's difficult, but I think in the end the positives far outweigh the negatives. And if you're passionate about it and you really want it to succeed, it makes a hell of a difference.
Fascinating. Let me thank all three of you: Adam Crozier of ITV, James Eaton of Private White VC, the clothes label, and Nick Sammons of Better Capital. Do visit our website, bbc.co.uk/bottomline, details of how to download the programme there. Otherwise, I'll be back with more guests next week.
Evan Davis, the producer, was Ben Crichton, and the programme is made in association with the Open University. Should we be eating more insects? They make up 80% of the species on Earth. At any one time, there are 10 quintillion of them living. But when did you last come face to face with one at dinner? After the news, the entomologist Erica McAllister will be looking at how insects could help us to live more healthily, more safely, and more sustainably. That's on Radio 4 FM. On Longwave, we're about to begin Test Match Special, commentary on the second day of the second test from Wellington. But now to take us up to 9 o'clock, Samira Ahmed will look ahead to Saturday.
Everyone loves David Bowie now. He's an establishment taste, but there was a time in the 70s when he tantalised and frightened in equal measure. Those cryptic lyrics, those skin-tight outfits, the androgyny. For British Asian girls growing up in the suburbs, he represented everything we shouldn't want to be. Our parents hated him. So why did he appeal to so many of us? The bold girls hung around outside.
Double the trouble for the businessman who wants to extend his cafe.
We think they've chosen to lose.
And instead of way to nowhere, leaves these homeowners